Today's class is dedicated in loving memory of Barry Sit, Alav Shalom, Lilu Nishmat, Ovadia Ben Esther, sponsored by his son Jack Sit. Today's class is dedicated in loving memory and Lilu Nishmat, Shaul Ben Eliyahu V'Tova, Shaul Ben Toba and Eliyahu HaKohen, Alav Shalom, sponsored by Simon Simantov. And today's class is also dedicated in loving memory of Pauline's father, Eddie Misri, Lilu Nishmat, Ezra Ben Victoria, on his first Askara, sponsored by Pauline and Soli Assad. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Mishnah Kaf Aleph, number 21, fourth chapter, Mishnah Kaf Aleph, number 21. Let's start, as we always do, by reading the words of the Mishnah in their straight and simple form. Rabbi Elazar HaKapar Omer, Rabbi Elazar from HaKapar used to say, Hakin'ah v'hata'ava v'hakavod motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. There's three things that remove a person from this world, that they get removed from this world because of. Kin'ah means jealousy. Ta'ava literally means lust or desires. V'hakavod and honor. Each three of these things literally remove a person from this world. So where do we find this concept that a person is literally removed from the world because of kin'ah, ta'ava, and kavod? So let's take a look at an example in the Torah. Where do we have a concept of kin'ah, removing a person from this world? Anyone remember? Korach. Korach is jealous of the leadership. It depends on how you understand it, but at the very least, he's jealous of the leadership of Eltzafan. He feels that he should be the leader of the tribe of Levi. So he winds up waging war against Moshe. What happens to Korach and all of his people? They get swallowed up, they die. That kin'ah, that jealousy, kills him. Okay? Another example of this, of someone dying because of kin'ah, ta'ava, and kavod, we find in the very beginning of the story of the Torah, Cain and Hevel. Cain brings a korban, Hevel copies him though with a better korban. The fact that Hevel's korban was a better korban caused God to accept it. Right? And since that was the case, right, what happened? Cain stands up and kills Hevel. So you find a brother murdering his own brother because of the jealousy that God showed favor to his brother, to the korban of Hevel. So we find the idea of kin'ah, ta'ava, and kavod. But if you look deeper, we see even more than that. In the story of Bereshit, before we even get to the second parasha, we find these concepts playing out in ever-increasing strength. Like as an example, we know that the reason why the the snake tries to get Chava to sin is because he was jealous of Chava that Adam had Eve. Yeah, that's what it says. So what happens to the snake? The snake suggests this thing in order to try and have Chava for himself. Chava eats from the tree because she's jealous. In the words of the snake, if you eat from the tree, the only reason why you're doing this is because God's trying to keep you down. If you ate from the tree, you would be like God yourself. She desires, she's got the kin'ah, so you have desire in the form of of the snake. You have jealousy in the form of the snake. You have ta'ava, desire in the form of chava, and jealousy in terms of that. And finally, kavod, you have Adam whose understanding of the tree is that it would make him bigger and more important, and therefore Adam also eats from it. So each one of the characters is animated by one of these concepts. And again, the result is death. Adam is granted death. Eve is granted death. But even the snake, in its current form, is granted death. He gets shifted from an animal that's wiser than all the animals, that's capable of speech, that's capable of walking, to some slithering being, reptile, on the floor. So again, these are esoteric concepts. They're very high mystical ideas. But you see in the very first chapter that this is the case. But in fact, it actually goes deeper than this. Our rabbis ask, what is original sin? What is the first sin that's ever visited on the in this world? Most people think, what's the first sin? Adam and Eve eating from the tree. That's called original sin. Right? What's the original sin? You're shaking your head?
I think it's Ayeka.
Ayeka happens after the tree.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't see the tree.
Right?
I
Ayeka,
see the sin.
it's after the Etzadat. So what's the first sin?
Before the Yereach.
The sun and the moon are created in the sky, and the Yareach, the moon, says to God, there can't be two kings. So what's the first sin? Is the sin of jealousy. If the first sin is the sin of jealousy, that's got to tell us something. Right? It's got to tell us something. And we'll try and explore that a little bit together today. Why is the first sin that gets done in this world the sin of jealousy? Okay? We'll talk a little bit about that today.
And it's an inanimate object also that is jealous.
Yeah, it's the moon that's jealous. How could the moon be jealous? Right? In fact, I want to widen the question. We read about the fact every day when we say Kaddish, the end of Kaddish says, Oseh, and we say in the end of the Amidah as well, Oseh Shalom Bimromav. He who makes peace in the heavens. Why does God need to make peace in the heavens? And the Chachamim explain that there is jealousy amongst the angels. How could there be jealousy amongst the angels? In fact, one of the questions they ask on this is that the Talmud says that when Moshe goes up to heaven to get the Torah, the angels say to him, why are you taking the Torah down to people on earth? And Moshe says the Torah befits people on earth. Do any of you, it says in the Torah, don't eat milk and meat together. Do any of you eat milk and meat together? Do you eat? It says in the Torah, remember when I took you out of Egypt. Were any of you slaves in Egypt? It says in the Torah, you shall not be jealous. Are any of you jealous? Seemingly indicating that Moshe was saying that there's no jealousy amongst angels. But in fact, the commentators look at that story, look at that Gemara, and they say that Moshe was not referring to the fact that there was no jealousy at all. He was saying that there isn't a certain type of jealousy amongst the angels. It doesn't look like the jealousy of humanity. So let's retranslate the question of Moshe. What does it say in the Torah? You shall not be jealous of your friend. What shall you not be jealous? That he has a bigger or better. Don't covet his house, his wife, his donkey, his possessions. Is that what you covet? Is there jealousy amongst you of the type that the Torah is referring to? And that there isn't. Yet there is jealousy. And what do they explain as the jealousy of the angels? The jealousy of the angels, as an example, it says that God did not name 10 angels Michael, he named one angel Michael. So that when God calls Michael, the angels called Michael should not be jealous that he was referring to or calling on one of them. Fascinating. So we find that there is a jealousy amongst the angels. No question, it's of a different type. It's made up of a different matter. But there is jealousy amongst angels. So what is this concept of jealousy that applies to angels, that applies to inanimate objects? Yes?
Is it the role that was given for you to play out, and maybe that's not particularly the role that you want to have? If it's a smaller role, let's say you're not the president of, the head chief rabbi, whatever role. You see somebody that seems to have a greater Abot or more thing, but you're supposed to fulfill, like the moon was supposed to fulfill what the moon's supposed to do. This is why Hashem created you.
So you're making a brilliant point. I want to come back to that in a minute, and you'll see why in just a second. Because you did something that without realizing that you did it, I think. I'll come back to it in a second. Okay? Yes.
If you have or do things that bring you closer to Hashem, that's something to be jealous of.
So we know that there's no jealousy when it comes to spirituality. But if the angels are jealous, all they have is spirituality. So clearly there is jealousy even in spirituality. What's the expression that Chazal say? Our rabbis tell us, kinat sofrim tarbeh chokhmah. the jealousy of the wise increases wisdom. So it seems clear, actually, right, that you're supposed to be jealous in spiritual matters. And yet, we find that Korach wants, at least ostensibly, something which is a spiritual matter. He'd like to be a Kohen Gadol, and yet that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. Okay, so now you're touching on what Gila was saying. We'll circle back to that in a minute. Yes?
All those stories, all those things that you pointed out, brings to the same sense of jealousy. The angels, Adam, Cain, and Abel, Korach. Is there also a jealousy of the proximity of them to God? Everybody wants to say, I am the closest to God, or I am very much like God. And that kind of thinking can bring disastrous acts, even to bring you to commit the worst crimes, including, but exactly, this jealousy brought Cain to kill Abel. And the fear of God is that you have time to be jealous about your relationship with me can bring you to do everything I'm trying to tell you not to do.
So the danger of the kin'ah, therefore, and this is interesting, because again, you also made the same, you did the same thing that they did, in a way. Let me express what it is that you guys are doing, which is wrong. It's not wrong at all. But what I'm trying to point out is that if you read the Mishnah simply and straightforward, in a straightforward manner, we are talking about three isolated objects. Kin'ah, jealousy. Ta'ava, desire. Kavod, honor. You talked about a jealousy of honor. Interesting, yeah? You talked about a jealousy which is motivated by a desire. I want to be closer to God than you. It doesn't matter, but the point is, it's the jealousy, it's not isolated. Like, how sometimes you have orange juice, it says 100% pure, right? There's no grape juice, there's no other juices, it's just orange juice. The first thing that you look at this Mishnah is, it seems like it's telling you there are three incredibly bad traits or desires or, methods that will take a person so far that it will remove him from this world. And what are they? These three. But actually, in almost every instance of one of these, another one is involved. So as an example, let's say I have the thing that's removing me from this world is honor. What you're retranslating honor into a hybrid, a jealousy of honor. Let me give you an example of pure honor that removes a person from this world. Not jealousy. I'm not jealous of your honor, but I get so much honor, it goes to my head, yeah? And I'll start doing things based on the fact that I want more honor. I'm not jealous of anybody else. I could be the most honored person. And then I'm so obsessed with, I'm so animated and driven by honor that what happens? It's not enough. I need more of it. So there, it's not jealousy of honor, like Korach, or I want to be the president, or I want to be closer, Kinat Sofrim, where I'm jealous of your honor, or as you said, jealous of your connection to God. Let's remove jealousy from it. It's just me. But I'm consumed so much, I'm animated so much by this one thing that I'm driven to do crazy things. But even there, it's an admixture of desire and honor. See, I want more honor. So let's try and isolate it even further, where it's not that I get a lot of honor and I want more, because that's ta'ava and kavod. Let's try and keep ta'ava, desire, out of it. How about if, as an example, I'm so drunk by, intoxicated by honor, that if something might impinge on that honor, I cast it aside. So as an example, let's say I'm idolized by all the people in my community. I come home, my wife, she knows who I am. Can't fool your wife and your kids, right? Come home, they know you're not so special. They know that you have this problem or this issue or that. You know what? I don't like to feel not perfect. They know my past. They know how I got here. But you know what? I spend less and less time at home. A lot of people do this with work. At work, they're a hero. At home, they're a villain. So what will they do? they'll spend less and less time in a place where they don't feel as honored, in situations where they don't feel as honored. In this group of people, I'm the alpha. In that group, there's another alpha, maybe bigger than me. So, not jealous of him, but I'm going to start preferring situations where I get more kavod. Now, those other situations might actually be, objectively more important for me to be involved in. But because in that place, I don't get to be alpha, what do? I just start voting with my feet. And I start coming to other places. I'll remarry someone who doesn't know my past. You see? That's pure honor. Now, ironically, and this is where we kind of go back to the Mishnah and cut the words apart. And I want you to hear these words very carefully. What is the result of these three things? Motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. They take you out of the world. The literal interpretation is, Cain, look what happened. It took him out of this world. Ironically, you think of the word death, but Cain wasn't the one that died. Hevel was. Maybe the message over there, if we're looking at it literally, is that Hevel copied Cain. It resulted in him getting removed from the world. Okay? Korach, his jealousy removed him from the world. That's the literal interpretation. You die. But a deeper understanding might mean that you are removed from your actual world. You start having to retranslate and requantify and reinterpret what the world looks like so the narrative fits your story. It's like people who create revisionist history in order for the narrative to work the way that they want it to work. So if I made a mistake, how do I start looking at it? I want to share with you a shocking story. There was a rabbi whose name was Reb Leib Saras. He was called that because of the great sacrifice that his mother had put into bringing him into this world and raising him. Reb Leib Saras, like he was Sarah's Reb Leib. His mother is Reb Leib. He goes to visit. He used to be on perpetual galut. He would travel from city to city, inspiring people to do teshuvah, etc., etc. And he stays in this inn. And this fellow treats him in such an exemplary and in such a beautiful way. The rabbi says, I really would like to give you a beracha. What can I bless you in? And the man says, I don't need anything. I have an amazing wife, have amazing children. So he says to him, maybe I can kind of help you in spiritual matters. Can I do that for you? Maybe you need to be blessed with more spirituality, with a greater ability to retain Torah teachings, or to become more charitable, or to overcome a certain defective character trait. The man says, Rabbi, I've also been blessed in spiritual world. I don't need any blessings there too. Perfect. The rabbi pushes him. He says, I'll tell you once, the halacha is that when a person makes hamotzi, so before they make hamotzi, they're supposed to, if they use a knife, they're supposed to put a cut in the part of the challah that they're going to cut from. Why? So that when you finish the beracha, the person can straight away cut from the best place. On the challah, there's no hefsek in the beracha. It's obviously a very small, minute law. Okay? So he says to the rabbi, he says, there was this one time when I didn't cut the challah. Wow. Is everyone okay? Maybe she passed, I don't know. Could you want to check? There's no answer. See if everything's okay. I don't know, it sounded like the whole cabinet fell. How could you be learning about Pirke Abot, hear a sound like that, and not find out if everything's okay? Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay? So, the guy says, there was this one time when I didn't cut the challah. Like, if you could bless me that I should have forgiveness from that. The rabbi's thinking, come on. Nobody's this perfect. So the rabbi starts asking him a couple of questions. He says, I noticed that you have a beautiful farm, beautiful house. The man says, yes. He goes, actually, it's not the only one I have. I have another one as well. little bit further down the road. Beautiful. The rabbi says, "Oh, how did you come to acquire the farm, your properties?" He says, "Oh, well, this one I own, and the other one, well, whatever. It's not I got it. However, I got it." The rabbi could see he was avoiding telling him how he acquired the other farm. So he says, "Well, tell me more. How did you acquire the other farm? Did someone give it to you?" He says, "No." Just anyway, he pushes him until eventually, this is the story that comes out. Listen to this, ladies. There was a fella down the road who had this magnificent farm. I saw it. It was beautiful, maybe more beautiful than mine. I decided I must have it. Beautiful animals, vegetation, situation, the sun, the earth was fertile, amazing. I went to this man, I offered him a very fair price for his farm, and the man said no. The man said the farm has been in his house for generations. I waited a week, I offered a little bit more. The man says no. I waited 2 more weeks, I offered even more. The man says no. I had to have this farm. It was so beautiful, it was so lush, it was so magnificent, even nicer than mine. I had to have it. I offered him something obscene, a crazy amount of money. And the man says, even if I had to walk barefoot on my farm, because I didn't have anything, I would never give this up. This is my family's misorah, handed down, grandparents to children, children to their children. This is our family heirloom. I'm not parting with it for nothing. Anyway, I came back, I was so upset. I was talking with all of my workers about this man and the farm and how much I wanted it and how unreasonable he was being. And one of my farm hands, he was a non-Jewish guy, he was very loyal to me. And it bothered him so much that I was so distressed about this farm. So he went round to the other guy's farm and he poisoned the feed of all of the cows, which was the primary income of that farm. All the cows died. He came to me afterwards to tell me, that he poisoned the feed of all the cows. And he told me, now it's only a matter of time before the man will have to accept your offer. Slowly but surely, the guy had no meat to sell. He had no calves being born. He had no milk, to milk from the cows. Slowly but surely, that created a knock-on effect. The man became poorer and poorer. Even then, when I made him an offer, the man refused. I told him, don't you realize, with this offer, I felt bad. I even told my non-Jewish, farmhand that he did a terrible thing. But what's done is done. Well, I could get the cows back now? So I made him a good offer. I told him, look, you're poor now. Let me buy the farm. The man says, no, I've told you, no matter what, I'm not giving up the farm. Well, slowly but surely, the man went into debt. Debt he couldn't repay. The creditors were ready to seize his land. And then I just went up to the debtors and I paid his credit and the farm became mine. And he says, I don't even know where this guy is anymore. I'm not even sure if he's alive. But you want to know how I came to own the farm? That's how I came to own the farm. Reb Leib Saras looks at this guy and he says, you murderer! You're not sure if the guy's even alive? You poisoned this food. You didn't tell him that you poisoned this food. You didn't pay him back for those cows. You didn't extend him an interest-free loan when he needed the food, when he needed to pay for food for his kids. You just stood by and waited for him to die and then paid the creditors, and you're not sure if he's dead. And when I asked you if you need a bracha in spirituality, you're telling me about a slice in the top of the bread for hamotzi? Don't you see how blinded you've become by your kinah, by your jealousy, by your desire, by your kavod? Each time you told me about his farm, you told me how beautiful it was. And each time you ended off with the words, even nicer than mine. What made you need that farm so badly? Because you couldn't deal with the fact that there was another farm in town that was nicer than yours, that you didn't have the nicest. Don't you realize? And he gave him musar, and he taught him until eventually the person, his heart was softened. He did teshuvah, and he went in search of this man to see if he was alive, if he had any inheritors, to make restitution for what he had done. The commentators explain that the Mishnah is telling us something that is understood on so many different levels. The first level is you do something that's so dastardly evil that you earn your exit papers from this world. You earn the zechut. You earn the merit to no longer be counted amongst the living. But there's a different interpretation. Motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. It takes the person out of the world he's living in, and it forces him to create a fake or false reality. Because you can't handle what you've done or what you've become. So the worker that you got fired because of the fact that you were jealous of their position, or that they got the raise, or that they got the nod to be the person in charge, and then you spread rumors about them, what do you say? The company was better off without them anyway. They were holding us all back. You tell yourself that they were greedy. You tell yourself that they were a ganav, that they were stealing. Why? So that you feel better about the thing that you've done. This man, what does he say? What a horrible person this guy. I offered him everything. He wasn't even worried about feeding his own kids when I gave him this big offer. Meanwhile, you're the Rasha. And yet you couldn't see it until someone forced that version upon you. So a lot of times, Motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam means that we need to retranslate our marriages. I always say this. One of the reasons why battered wife syndrome exists, people who can be abused by their husbands. And by the way, there's not only physical abuse in this world. A person can be abused mentally, they could be abused emotionally. A person can even be abused spiritually. Did you ever hear of that term? Spiritual abuse? Spiritual abuse is when someone says to their wife or husband, what a horrible person they are. Look at how you keep Shabbat. Look at how you are in front of the kids, losing your temper. The Torah says that, The Torah says that anger, someone loses their temper, is like Oved Avodah Zarah. What are you, an idol worshiper? That's spiritual abuse. Making someone feel less than, unimportant, useless. And what happens in every single instance of battered wife syndrome? And by the way, battered wife syndrome should be retranslated to battered spouse syndrome. Because if you think it's only women that do abuse, they get abused, you're mistaken. Okay? What happens in battered spouse or battered wife syndrome? Eventually the woman says, look, it's not his fault. The dinner wasn't ready on time. Look, it's not his fault. I did promise that I would take care of the kids, and even though, I needed his help for this situation, I should have let him know in advance. I didn't let him know. It's my fault. The change of narrative happens so strongly in the abuser's hands, in the person who holds the power's hands. That story gets told in such a persuasive way that eventually the other person starts to believe the story too. Motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam, we create new realities because the narrative that person is telling doesn't work for me with my kavod. That makes me look bad. So that's not the story. They started. It's their problem. It's their fault. But there's a deeper understanding here as well. Motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. It removes the humanity from the person in his world. We are capable of doing the worst things when we employ the justification of kin'at ta'ava and kavod. Sometimes they work as a 1-2-3 punch. I'm jealous of something, therefore I want it. But why do I want it? For the kavod. That's a triplicate. That's when the triple crown, if you will, okay? But they can operate in isolation. So how does kin'ah operate without ta'ava? How does jealousy work? Just 100% pure jealousy. So I explained earlier how kavod could operate without, I don't have to be jealous of you for kavod to remove me from the world, to remove my humanity from me, to allow me to do horrible things. Right? It's not about your kavod, it's about my kavod. I want more kavod, right? I like my kavod, therefore I'm happy to destroy anybody else because they're threatening my kavod. I don't want yours, I have the top position. But if another rabbi, another worker, another family member is kind of seems like they're climbing the ladder, I make sure to keep them down. I don't want theirs, but I'm happy with mine, and I ain't letting anyone touch mine. Okay? How does kin'ah operate without ta'ava? Every time you're jealous of something, you desire it, right? So you want it. So how do you have kin'ah without ta'ava? Sometimes a person is so jealous of something, they know they'll never get it. So what animates them in the kin'ah is not in trying to acquire that thing. Let's say, as an example, a person doesn't have the nicest figure, and they're jealous of the way someone else looks. As much jealousy as there is in the world, like, I'm not going to be able to take their looks, right? Let's say someone is wealthy, you could be jealous of their wealth, I want their wealth, right? Let's say someone has a great personality. Could you be jealous of their personality in a way where you'll acquire it? No. So there are times when my jealousy is not twinned with the desire for that thing. That desire is never going to be met. It's never going to happen. So what do I do to quiet my jealousy? I highlight all the negatives of that person in order to make the thing that they have that I wish I had seem smaller, seem less desirous. It's true that everybody likes them, but you know what I heard why people like her so much? You know what I heard? Why, huh? Oh, that rabbi, he's very popular. You know what I heard? That's because he allows people to get away with everything. You know, he doesn't stand up for what's right. He's a people pleaser. So his speeches, so his kindness, so his piety, so his prayers, none of those matter. He's not the real deal. See? Okay.
The word kin'ah in Hebrew he said envy here, but envy is not the same thing as kin'ah. Kin'ah can be envy, sure, but Elkanah, or when I need Mekana Hashem, Eliyahu is so kanai. He's so kanal Hashem. That's why I try to say about the thing about Cain and Abel. That the word kin'ah sometimes is by proximity to God. And Eliyahu is a perfect example. I mean, Eliyahu has people killed on left and right because no rain comes. He doesn't want the rain. He wants to punish them because of what happened with Achav and Isabel and Leah Sheket and Bernabé. So the kin'ah to God sometimes is what I said. They're like, why my relationship of proximity to God. And that's Korach as well. It's not always the kin'ah that we say, I'm jealous at you. I'm a kanah, you're more beautiful than me.
So you're sharpening the lens. In other words, what you're saying is that sometimes there's jealousy from, and sometimes there's jealousy for. So being jealous for God, Eliyahu, I mean, you know, there would be some people that would say, oh, Eliyahu was jealous. What does it mean he's jealous for God? Because he's a prophet of God, and they're prophets of Baal. So really he's jealous for himself. Now, we would not ascribe that to Eliyahu. What we're saying is, like Pinchas. Pinchas sees Zimri. Zimri and Pinchas have zero in common. Like, nothing happens to Pinchas if Zimri gets away with this. Zero. But the Chilul Hashem, he's so jealous that God's honor is not being upheld, that it bothers him and animates him and motivates him to such a level where he's capable of going and doing this act of, it's interesting because they use the words interchangeably, jealous and zealous, right? So Eliyahu is zealous. Pinchas, who is Eliyahu, is zealous, okay? It's when they're jealous for God. However, I want to share that I think that even that zealousy also comes from a terminology of jealousy, but it comes from an appropriate terminology of jealousy. We said earlier, there's some jealousy in spiritual matters that's appropriate. Like if I see you doing kindness, I see you getting this mitzvah, I'm like, wow, what a beautiful mitzvah. I want that mitzvah. Not because I want that mitzvah because you have it and that makes you better than me and I want to be as good as you. No. I also want that beautiful thing that you have. I don't want you to not have it. That's the difference between good jealousy and bad jealousy. Let's say as an example, you see someone who's working really hard. They're doing their best, successful at work, and I'm sitting here like an idiot in front of my computer, bored. I'm jealous of the fact that you have a job that excites you, that you get up in the morning for, happy to go to. I also want a job like that. Is that bad jealousy? No.
Inspiration, though.
Because I don't want your job. I also want a job that makes me happy. Right? So if I look at you and I see in you a model for imitation, not for the form of not from an evil place, but from a constructive place. I see you being kind, and I see in myself, you know what? I'm not a kind person. You know, I see someone who's always positive. I try and be a person who's always positive. You meet people who are always negative. You know what I always think? How exhausting must it be to always be negative and cynical? How tiring must such a lifestyle, a life outlook like that? It sucks out all the energy from you all the time being, negative. Imagine a person looks at someone who's positive and they're like, I want that. I want to be positive. That's not a problem. You know why? Because I don't want your positivity, like give it to me and you should become negative, right? I'm happy for you to stay as positive as you are. In fact, I'm using you as a role model, right? So when we look at this Mishnah, I think we are understanding that these ideas, they can operate interchangeably and interconnected, in an interconnected fashion, or they can operate in isolation. Ta'ava, I want, I need, I must have. I need, a nicer car. I need it. I need a new phone. I need new clothes. I have to have them. And I always say this, it's such an interesting terminology. It doesn't say motzi'in oto min ha'olam, motzi'in et ha'adam. It removes the humanity. One way in which these traits remove a person's humanity is what you're capable of doing in order to have these unrequited desires fulfilled. What you're willing to say to someone or about someone in order to make sure that you protect your honor, your position, your stature, yeah? That's one way. It removes the humanity. But there's another element as well. And listen to this, because I think this is really clever. What makes me go to work every day, work so hard? What makes me need to strive in my business, spend more time at work than I need to be spending? Not 9 to 5, 6 until 11:30, 12 o'clock. What makes a guy in finance, what makes people give their lives away to work? Become workaholics. It's not the necessities of life, right? It's the extras, right? Isn't it? If you lived in a tiny apartment, if you had the smallest or cheapest car, if you bought the least expensive groceries, if you didn't go out to eat all the time in fancy restaurants, if you didn't need vacations, you had more staycations. You drove, to the ocean in Deal instead of driving to the ocean in Puerto Banús, right? Then your income would need to be much less. I just read yesterday about a woman who's a multi-millionaire, who is the cheapest multi-millionaire in the world. She turns off the electricity in the house at the circuit breakers because it's not enough to turn the lights off. Right? So if she wants a shower, she turns on the circuit breaker, then she turns on the boiler, turns exactly enough hot water, and turns it off. One of her friends came over to eat, and she made her lunch, and then she noticed on the counter was open 2 cans of cat food. She said, "Did you just serve me cat food?" And the woman said, "Tuna fish in the supermarket is 89 cents. Cat food, tuna, is 59 cents. I just saved 30 cents. No brainer. Now, I'm not exactly sure how true that is. Which parts of the tuna are they putting in? Are they chopping up, grinding up the bones as well? The constitution of a cat is not the same constitution of a human. How careful are they being? Are they adding any other additives that would not be fit for human consumption? Right? But you have people that are animated not necessarily by what they need, but by what they want. Correct? So what happens when a person is animated by desire and they work all day long only in order to feed those desires? So they work to feed, they work to feed, work to feed, work to feed. Oftentimes, they lose out on the human experiences of this world because they're so busy in the animalistic experiences of this world. So let's talk about that for 1 minute. You have a person who all the time is spent in eating food. They're foodies. That's feeding the basest part of the human experience, because we share that with animals, don't we? Isn't that true? Right? So as an example, there's human things that humans do, and there's primal or animal things that humans do. When we are operating out of kin'ah, out of jealousy, out of ta'ava and kavod, what are we plugging into? We're plugging into our animalistic desires. And therefore the experiences that we chase in our world become animalistic experiences. If I asked you for a minute, what are the most human experiences that a human can experience in this world? What would you say they are? Love. Beautiful. Animals do not have love. What else? Kindness. Animals do not have kindness. Even if a dog saves its master, it's not out of kindness, it's out of self-preservation. What else?
Compassion.
Sorry?
Compassion.
Compassion. The things,
I'm not too sure.
animals do not have compassion.
Kindness and compassion.
They have
A monkey, if she finds a baby and she won't milk it, the baby monkey is not even hers.
that is a trait that looks compassionate, but they are programmed to do so. So in other words, this trait is what's called the self, actually Dawkins writes about this in his book, The Selfish Gene, that certain animals' preservation is not written in code only to preserve itself, but it's written in terms of preserving its offspring. And certain times it's written to preserve not just its offspring, but also its kind, okay? But as an example, you might not find a gorilla being kind to a baby sheep, right? A human being can see a suffering animal, pick it up off the street and take it to a veterinarian. There's no self-preservation coded into that act, you see? It's not itself, its children, or its species it's trying to promote, which it bothers us if you see a turtle wrapped in, caught in plastic in the ocean. Even if it's on the other side of the world, you're like, oh, there's compassion there. So the point I'm making, again, I don't want to get caught up in this because we don't need to debate the finer points of what is and what isn't. But the point is, and this is crucial, the more time a human being spends in human experiences, the happier a human is. The more time a human experiences or spends time experiencing the experiences it shares with animals, the less happy it is. Let me prove it to you. I want to use a very simple example. Procreation, intimacy, the act of reproduction. It's an act that we share with animals. So on a surface level, you have men or women that are obsessed with the act of sex itself. And then they'll go wantonly and in an adulterous way, one night stand after one night stand. Are they experiencing pleasure from that? Absolutely. Right? One, you can't argue that the act is not pleasurable. It wouldn't make the world go round the way it does if it wasn't, right? But the irony is, people like that are never truly happy. Because ultimately, what they were really seeking in the act of sexuality is true intimacy. And they are not experiencing human intimacy in that act. They are experiencing an animalistic level of intimacy. And that cannot be enough for a human, because there's supposed to be much more. So it looks like, it feels like, but it isn't. And in an ironic way, the fact that the person can, a guy who has all the money and all the looks and everything and all the popularity, that he could be with whoever he wants, actually after a time, it starts to grate on him more and more and more and more. And actually the more that he experiences that, the worse off he feels. Because he's so close, it seems, but so far from what it should be. Is this clear? We're supposed to use our ability, our power in life to make the world a better place. But people who use power in a narcissistic way, where it only actually benefits themselves, after a time they get so addicted to that power that they will allow that need for power to destroy them. I was talking about this the other day. You have some people who, in this story of this get refusals, right? They're driven by the power that they have over this woman. They're driven by it. It feeds that the kavod, you know, that exists, that they in their brain, that there's some level of position or stature that they have when they're holding someone hostage. But you think about what drives that. Why do they want that power? Because it makes them feel good, right? We want things that make us feel good. We don't want things that make us feel bad, do we? We want things that make us feel good. But there comes a point where the Adam is so taken from this world that it's beyond all proportion. Because you're looking for power, correct? But now there's a crowd outside your house. No one wants to work with you. You just lost your job. You have no income, right? You're a pariah on the face of society. No one will be with you. So all these other things that actually also make a person feel good seem to fade as the person doubles down on this one power play. You see that? That's motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. You can become so myopically focused on this one thing. Family fights are a lot like this. A lot like this. I'll give you an example. It's just a simple example. This is my favorite example. I was talking about people who have such a problem with family that they won't speak to family members for years at a time. And in this story, okay, I gave a joke. I told a joke, and in this joke, there's a guy. Sorry, not a joke. A story of Mashal. There's a man, a rabbi, new rabbi officiating at a funeral. At the end of the funeral, there's one man standing in the back, and the fellow is, uncontrollably crying. Rabbi walks up to him. He says, "Were you very close with the deceased? Everyone else is gone. You're still here." He says, "The deceased was my brother." The rabbi feels very bad. He mentioned everyone else in the family. He didn't mention this guy. So he says, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mention you. I wasn't aware that you were a brother. I must have not paid attention when they sent me the list." And the man says, "Rabbi, it's not your fault. I wasn't on the list. I didn't make the list of siblings, of family members. Because my brother and I haven't spoken for 40 years. The rabbi says to this older man, he says, "I'm truly sorry that you experienced this loss." He says, "But excuse my chutzpah. Do you mind if I ask, what is it that a person could have had happen that would make them not speak for 40 years to their brother?" And the man says, "That's why I'm crying, because I can't remember." I tell the story. It's in Birmingham, in England, where I'm relating the story in shul. After I finish, there's this old fella with a walker, big glasses, who starts making his way up to the podium. Ancient. He finally gets all the way to the front and he says, Rabbi, I want to tell you, I haven't spoken to my sister in 60 years. So now I'm the rabbi in the story. So I said, excuse my chutzpah, but what could have happened that would make someone not speak to their sister for 60 years? And he goes, Rabbi, I'm not like the guy in the story. I remember what it was. I said, well, what was it? He says, when my father passed away, so my sister went to the apartment and we were looking through all the things that were left behind. And I told her she could have the apartment, she could have everything in the apartment. The only thing I wanted was a menorah that was there, that had been handed down in our family. That's the only thing I told her she could have everything else. Rabbi, she took the apartment, she took everything else. And when she told them what to throw out, she let them throw out, along with all the other garbage in the apartment, whatever wasn't needed. They threw out the menorah. It's the only thing I asked her for, Rabbi. She took everything else and she couldn't, be cognizant, kind enough. So I already knew the answer to this, but I needed to say it to him so he would hear. I said, tell me, was this menorah made out of solid gold with diamonds? He goes, Rabbi, no. It's not about the money. It wasn't an expensive menorah. It was made out of a metal. I said, what was so important then about this menorah? He goes, Rabbi, this menorah has been passed down from generation to generation. It's not a menorah. It's not about a menorah. It's not about the money. This is about, he says, this is about something in a family heirloom. This menorah represented our family. And I looked at the man and I said, please excuse my chutzpah once again. So for something that represents family, you're going to throw away actual family? And the guy's looking at me with these, giant magnifying glasses eyes. And I see his big eyes. And he starts to cry. He starts to tear up and cry. He says, I guess I have a phone call to make. $60 years. You see, you're going to the blame game. Who cares whose fault it was? My point is that if I, a crazy American young rabbi, hadn't taken the time to pull the story out, to parse the details, to ask him what should be an obvious question, the only reason why it's important to you is because it represents family. But yet here you have a sister. She's alive. That's motzi'in adam min ha'olam. You could become so fixated on this one thing, that you forget about everything else. I think maybe a good example, a good exercise is the word I was looking for, is for us to sit down for 1 second now before we leave today and to ask ourselves in the truest possible way, what are we jealous of? Who are we jealous of? Those are two different questions. What and who? Sometimes we're jealous of a thing. Sometimes we're jealous of a person. What's the difference? So sometimes you might be jealous, as an example, let's go basic. Someone's car. It's got nothing to do with the person. You want the car, right? Sometimes it's that this is my brother, this is my sister. We're supposed to be the same. The only reason why the car bothers you is because it's the person that has it. Like, we grew up together, we were in the same class. Or I was dating her husband before she actually went out with him and married him. And now she's driving that car. That car should have been mine. That house should have been mine. It's got nothing to do with the house or the car. That's about the person. So just for 1 second, think deeply. What and who are you jealous of? Now, that doesn't have to manifest as a thought like, I want what this person has. It's when I think to myself about my job, my salary, someone else who has a bigger, better role or a better salary, that's jealousy. Because if you're looking at it versus someone, versus what I am worth, or as an example, I look at my children, and I think to myself, I wish my children were better. Because look at this person's kids. They bring him only nachat. They bring her only joy, only happiness. How come my kids can't be like that? Well, how come this kid can't be like the other kids? Right? These are thoughts of jealousy in a certain sense. Okay, so to recognize that and to actually point it out, just to see what it does to us. In fact, Shlomo HaMelech says, that you know what kin'ah does? It rots a person's bones from the inside out. Rekev atzamot kin'ah. What a fantastic expression. What does he mean to say? What's the term rotting bones? The bones are the structure of a person's body. They what helps keep us standing. When a person suffers from extreme osteoporosis, right? The legs can literally crumble from right underneath them. They'll stretch their arm too much, right? And the bones will crack, right? Rekev atzamot, when the bones are rotten, the person can't function. They can't stand, sit, run, walk, because they're not doing, and that's what kin'ah does to a person. It robs from the person their ability to actually live their life in a good way, because they're busy all the time wanting something that someone else has, right? Sometimes a person they're jealous not of a thing, but of the way that their life broke. Do you know what I mean by that? Like the mazal that they have. That's another example of jealousy and the bitterness that it causes. So let's go back to our original question, and we'll answer this question now, and we'll work it into this exercise. How could an angel have jealousy? How could the moon have jealousy? How does that happen? They don't have a Yetzer Hara. I think this is beautiful, because it ties into something all three of you said earlier. What does the moon want when it wants to shine exclusively in the sky? The moon feels, it says, you can't have two kings. You need one king. What's the moon really saying? I want to be the one. I want to be the one to serve God. What is the angel saying? I want to be the one to do that job. Or I want to be the one Michael. He said God doesn't call multiple angels by the same name, so they shouldn't feel like they were left out. That desire, where does it come from? It comes from the fact that people want to, they desperately need to fulfill the role that they were designed in order to do. And again, we've talked about this before. The truest form of happiness in a person's life happens when they are operating as they were created to operate. What that means is, if I have 10 skills in my skill set, and 9 of them are being used to the max, you know what, even more than to the max, but there's one part that isn't being used, I am literally unfulfilled. So you have mothers who feel a dull ache, an emptiness in their life when they're just being mothers. They feel like they need a career, they need to go do something, they need to work. Other mothers don't understand why you feel this need. I'm happy being a mother, taking care of my kids, doing all these things. Why do you need this? They don't even understand the drive. And perhaps that's because the drive of this woman, all of what she is being fulfilled within the role of being a mother. So let's give you an example. I want you to imagine, just for the sake of symmetry, the same woman. Exactly. You can't say identical twins, because identical twins are not identical. They're not identical in the way they think, in the way they feel, right? They have different souls. But I want you to imagine a photocopy of the same person. How could you have one mother who feels fulfilled in her role as a mother, as a wife, and one who does not? Well, imagine this woman is married to someone who stimulates her, married to someone who has children in her life that stimulate her. She has children that require a certain creativity in order to be able to bring them up, in order to be able to have them be happy. So the creativity of this woman is being utilized. Her intellectual stimulation is being realized within a marriage, within her children. The other woman might have children that are incredibly independent. It's not a bad thing that they are so. She might have a husband who maybe is either less than her intellectually or also more than her intellectually. She might not feel that she has someone with which to spar, with which to feel alive in her mind, in her soul, in her heart. So where does she look for that? She looks for it somewhere else, maybe in a career. Is this clear? Right? So no one is better or worse than the other person. It's just the experiences, the situation, the story of their life, which requires something to fulfill it. So when the moon sees that there's a sun, the moon says, if I'm supposed to bring light to the world, and there's another one that brings light to the world, so we're both bringing light to the world. If both of us are doing the same thing, then what is the purpose of each of us? Are you hearing that? That's what the moon says. I don't understand. Why do I exist? What is my purpose? A lot of times mothers who spent their life being mothers, and then their children leave the nest, and initially they need all of your help when they first get married, when they first have kids. Non-stop questions, which bottles, what formula, which vitamins, having this issue, what should I do? But after a time, when that's no longer the case, there's this existential crisis. Who am I? What am I? What am I supposed to do? What is my purpose? Why am I alive? What is my function? What do I exist for? So the kin'ah, in a certain sense, it comes from this sense, or is there for the sake of a person's preservation, a person's actual existence. Is this clear? Now we start to understand how jealousy and zealousy intersect. Pinchas, who is Eliyahu, Pinchas looks at the situation and says, this can't be. This is not how it's supposed to be. This is my role. I'm supposed to be the one that sets this right. Okay? The jealousy of the angels is the same. An angel's only existence is to be of service to Borei Olam. So imagine there's two Michaels, which means that there's two angels who have the same job. And God calls on one of them. What is the other angel doing now? So the other angel feels useless. There's a kin'ah which is existential. It's not experiential. It's not extraneous. It's at my core. That's why there's something called kin'at sofrim. And that's why it's marbeh chokhmah. When I look at the person, I see how much they know. I see the person, I see how much they're doing. I say to myself, my existence is not being justified. I'm not kind. I'm not learned. Not I'm not as learned as you. I'm not learned. What would my life look like if I added some Torah wisdom to it? Are you understanding that? Okay. So, back to that point. What are we jealous of? What do we look to in other people and wish that we had? Now let's broaden this. Who are the role models in your life that make you feel that there is more that I should be accomplishing? That's also part of this kin'ah. It's just on the positive side. Because sometimes the reason why you want to be your role model is because you want to have what your role model has. Then it's kin'ah mixed with kavod. Sometimes you want to be kind because kind people are really well liked. Then it's kin'ah mixed with ta'ava. You see? I'm anxious for that. Okay? Let's move on to ta'ava. If I had to make a list of the top 3 negative things that I want in my life, what are they? And when I use the word negative, I don't mean bad things. I mean not spiritual pursuits. What are the top 3 things that animate my life? What wakes me up in the morning? What makes me go to work? What makes me say the things I say or do the things I do? How do I decide what my schedule is every day? Isn't that powerful? What do I desire? What do I want? And then ask, what are my 3 spiritual wants? And if you don't have, let's get you some. What do I want? What do I want to be more of? Not just what do I want to have more of. Okay? And finally, kavod. I love this, by the way, this ta'ava thing. You ever want to see ta'ava in the flesh? Pardon my pun here. Look at a person who does too much plastic surgery. Because there's that first bit where it makes you look better. And then they do a second bit and it makes it look better. And then they go just that bit too far. And then they look weird. They have 0 expression. See what I'm saying? That's where you see ta'ava. And now you lost humanity. You can't see expressions anymore. That's a simple example of ta'ava in the flesh that you can witness it on someone's face. No, well, again, what are they doing it for? Sometimes they're jealous of the way someone else looks, then it's kinah. Sometimes it's that I want to look beautiful, that's ta'ava. Right? Again, if it's misplaced. Sometimes it's kavod. But it's not in its smallest form. But in its biggest form, you can see how it took the human out of, there's no expression anymore. Right? I'm surprised, but you can't tell. For the life of me, I don't understand. Also, when did we, as humans, need to have like fat lips? What? Why? I don't understand. Are they trying to look more like a duck? I'm not exactly sure what the draw is, but either way, right? So you see what animates my decisions. And finally, kavod. Kavod, kavod, kavod. Where is my ego? Where is my ego ruining my life?
What is this word? The Hebrew word is not
Kavod is honor.
No, is it kavod? I'm not saying that.
Yeah, it's the one right, it's the last single word.
Thank you.
Where is my ego ruining my life?
Ego in Hebrew. Like ego?
Yeah, they just translated ego. Yeah.
But I mean, there's no real biblical, like,
No.
it's the honor, it's connected to honor.
Maybe one would call it atzmiut. Yeah, but I'm not sure. There isn't a Talmudic, there isn't a Torah world. The word for arrogance is ga'ava. But ego is not only, by the way, it's not only arrogance. Ego is much deeper than arrogance. But let's just say for a second, ego, right? Where is my ego getting in the way of my life?
Edge God out.
Ego is
Yeah.
a need, is a superior need.
Yes. Well, it's
The ego is
ego. You know what ego is? You know what ego is? You know what someone said? You know the easiest way to commit suicide? In Israel, there's a joke that goes, what's the easiest way for a man to commit suicide? To jump from his ego to his reality. Right? That's a very famous Israeli joke. An ego is a perceived sense of self. Almost always a mistakenly perceived sense of self. A healthy ego is an accurate portrayal, but a positive, accurate portrayal of self. Okay? So where is my ego getting in the way? So an example would be where actually I would be much happier ending a fight, but I can't let myself, I'm too proud. That's ego, kavod, ruining a person's life. Forgiving somebody, can't. Asking for help, asking for help, where I'm embarrassed to ask, what's there to be embarrassed of? Because my perceived image of self should not need help. See? Very hard. And that could be in anything. It could be in technology. It could be in overcoming something. Sometimes a person is ruining their life with their family, with their friends, and they just want to say, look, I need more sensitivity right now. That's all they need to say. I need you to not be so brutally honest with me. You know how that's usually our thing? Right now I'm vulnerable. So what do we do instead? We attack back to protect ourselves now. But if you didn't have such an ego, you might just say to the person, instead of attacking them, you might just say, can we not do this now? I'm vulnerable. A unwillingness to admit vulnerability comes from an unhealthy ego. Because a healthy ego would say, I need you to know that I'm vulnerable now. Or I'm vulnerable in this area. So again, our workshop for today is, what is kavod? What is kavod? How is it destroying you? How is it removing you from living your life? And the irony is, by the way, if you open up any book on addiction, you know what it will tell you? That the specific and scientific terminology of addiction. I like ice cream. Does that make me an addict? An ice cream addict? I like power. I like influence. Does that make me an addict or power or influence? I like gambling. Here and there, I like to go to the casino. Does that make me an addict?
Only when it becomes detrimental to your own health.
So the actual terminology that they use is when the addiction is so strong that it is disrupting the person's life. And I want to change it because it's ruining my life, but I can't. That's an addict. The irony is, let's look one more time. Motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. These are problems when they are removing you or stopping you, prohibiting you from having the ability to live your life. Okay? So that's our work. I could say for this week, but I really mean for this life. That's our work for this life. And before I end, I just need to thank everyone for coming out and carrying on. I need to welcome you back for the briefest window, and what's it called? And to wish you all a beautiful week in the weeks ahead. Thank you so much for attending.